What's the worst advice you've ever given? I told my older sister to touch grass, and it ruined her life. It all started when she stopped showering for days on end. She wore the same hoodie for 7 days straight until the hallway outside her room started smelling like a gym locker. When I mentioned it to Mom, she just sighed. We're doing what the doctors recommended. You need to trust us. Dad was even stranger, adding, some things have to run their course. I couldn't sleep one night and found her in the hallway at 2 a.m., illuminated by her phone screen. Kesha, Dad said lights out at 10, I whispered. Just 5 more minutes. That's when Dad appeared in the doorway. Kesha, we've talked about this. She barely acknowledged him, and I noticed her hands were shaking. When I woke up the next morning, she was gone. No clothes in the closet, no posters on the walls, even the sheets were stripped. I ran downstairs to find Mom calmly making breakfast. Where is she? I demanded. Your sister needed serious help, she said, keeping her voice low. So we sent her to a facility to help her get better. I was just 11 at the time and assumed my parents knew best. So I went about life as normal. And after 2 months, Kesha finally came home. When I ran to hug her, she just stood there tensed up with her eyes completely glossed over. She was ghost white, and her eyes were constantly scanning the room like a trapped animal. Hello, my dear sister, she said, her voice flat and mechanical. My dad led her up to her bedroom, and she went straight to sleep. While she slept, my dad took her door off the hinges. She had to wear gloves at all times so she couldn't touch anyone. They even installed a bell on her ankle that jingled when she walked. When I asked my parents why they couldn't just leave her alone, they'd send me to my room and say, you wouldn't understand. But I never stopped trying. At night, I'd sneak into her room just to talk, even though she'd always push me out with tears streaming down her face, begging, please don't let them see you here, while pointing towards the ceiling. That's when I noticed the small red light blinking in the corner. They'd installed cameras to watch her at night, and if I ever tried to enter her room during the day, my parents would appear within minutes. One evening, I heard our parents talking in hushed tones. The deprogramming is working, Mom said with satisfaction. She's finally breaking the addiction. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know what they'd done to my sister. I waited until our parents were distracted and cornered her in the kitchen. What did they do to you? I whispered urgently. What was the facility for? She looked around nervously, making sure we were truly alone. Then she leaned in close, and what she told me changed everything. I was playing League of Legends 18 hours a day, she whispered. I was peeing in bottles so I wouldn't have to leave my desk. I failed every single class last semester because I couldn't stop playing. I stared at her in shock. I'd never even seen her play LOL before. That's it? Video games? She nodded miserably. The facility was a gaming addiction rehab center. The video calls are to make sure I'm not playing. I'm not allowed to touch any electronic device without supervision for 6 months. I believed her because things were easier that way, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. Until a week later, when I needed my purple hair clip for picture day. Kesha had borrowed it months ago before everything went bad. I waited until she was in the shower, one of the few times she was allowed privacy, and slipped into her room. That's when I caught sight of a small leather diary shoved behind her bed. The last page she wrote was dated from 8 days ago, written in Kesha's shaky handwriting. Day 64. I told her the League of Legends story like Mom instructed. She believed it. I'm so sorry, Millie. My name. My hands went cold. I flipped to the start of the journal, with diary entries from before the facility. Most pages were torn out, but one entry remained, dated 3 days before Dad caught her in the hallway. When I'm scrolling, I can forget what happens when Uncle Monty visits. It's the only time my brain goes quiet, the only time I don't feel his hands all over me. But Millie told me to touch grass, and Mom went crazy. She said if I'm so glued to my phone that even my 11-year-old sister is making jokes, people will start asking questions. They're taking it away tomorrow. Suddenly, it all made sense. I was still reading when I heard the floorboard creak. You weren't supposed to find that, my mom's voice bellowed behind me. Full story on channel, link below.